came out in 1990, I made it part of my routine that I would every 6 months go get tested. So when I went in to get tested on January 8th, 2004, the clinician asked me what he expected my test results to be. And I naturally said, I expect them to be negative. And he said, well, in fact, they're positive. And with that, I had one extra visit with him to kind of adjust to my new life. And it obviously brought up a lot of questions to me about what that new life would be.
So I'm HIV negative, and I was first tested back in 1994 when I was part of a multi-site research study. It was an intervention study. I think it was 3 or 4 states that was involved in this, and that was looking for folks who had engaged in risky behavior. So it's really the kind of the basic. And I've gotten tested pretty much every year, just because.
About 2 years ago, I went for a routine doctor's visit. I was getting a physical, and off the cuff, having been safe, I had always practiced safe sex, but off the cuff, I said, you know what? It's been a little while since I got tested. Run the just run the STD panel. You know, just better safe than sorry. And the results came back about a week later, and my doctor informed me that I was HIV positive. When I found out, I immediately went into, I called it warrior mode, where I said, you know, well, if I'm going to have this, then I'm going to be awesome at it, because I'm awesome at so many other things. I might as well be awesome at having HIV, which some people thought was kind of weird and disturbing that I had such a militaristic view of it. But I said, you know, I'm not gonna be upset about this. I'm going to make a difference.
I found out my status a very long time ago. I was actually in my 20s. And it was before any HIV drugs were even around. They didn't even really know that much information about what was going to happen. And I went specifically to find out that I was negative. I was going there to get confirmation that I was negative. I wanted to be a parent, and I wanted to look into co-parenting or other options to become a parent, and completely dumbfounded by the news.
I was dating somebody, and they asked me if I had ever had an HIV test, and I said, no. Why would I need to get an HIV test? They said, because you can get infected by having sex. And I said, yeah, but that's not gonna happen to me. And they said, you should go get tested.
I am 26 years old, turning 27, and I was born with HIV. My mother, I come from a family of drug addicts. Come from a family of tweakers, alcoholics, you name it, that's what I come from. My mom got HIV, AIDS, through shooting up. She passed away in July of 1994, and we did not know that she had AIDS. She had opportunistic infection, pneumonia. She had gotten it twice, and then it ended up turning into a brain tumor. And that was kind of my introduction of living with HIV, or HIV and AIDS in general, was taking care of my mom when she was dying, and then her passing away when I was 7 years old.
And I get tested usually about once a year, but I've been in a monogamous relationship for about 2 years, so it really hasn't been a factor. I started getting tested in college when I became sexually active, and I've never really had any fear about it. To me, it was just kind of the thing that you did once you were having sex, is you get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. My HIV status is negative. For me to be tested is a measure of trust between you and whoever you have sex with, so you should know your own status.
I've been HIV positive for over 30 years. I'm 45 years old. So if you make the math, you know, I became HIV positive around when I was 15 years old. And that it was right in the 80s when this new disease appeared, which was horrific.
I started getting tested shortly after my first sexual experience. I'm a hypochondriac, so it was nothing more than that. I went to Planned Parenthood because it was anonymous and free. I would go there I went there for a while until I found out about AHF, AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And I started going and getting tested there frequently while living in LA. Once every 2 months even.
In those days, because I went to the doctor at school, he said it would take a week. And that week was one of the toughest weeks of my life because suddenly I realized that, oh my God, I might have HIV because I've never been tested before and I have been sexually active. And it was really, really tough for me. And then when the call came and I found out he told me that I was negative. It was like this, this humongous burden had been lifted off, my shoulders, and I vowed to be I vowed to be more careful in my sex practices and also to be more responsible in my behavior. That was many years ago. So 12 years later, I'm negative. I get tested every 3 months. Sometimes I get tested every 2 months. Sometimes it takes 6 months, but I get tested for everything, and it's just a part of my regimen, like getting my teeth cleaned.
I was raised thinking that gay and HIV were hand in hand. So I guess I always thought that I would get it if I was gay, which is kind of awful. It was a big relief to walk out of a clinic knowing that I didn't get hit that time. And the results were different one day. And it was just unbelievable. It was like a, what? It was a silent cry too. It was really weird. Just like water started pouring out of my face.
My family had a friend who was dying of HIV, and my mother looked at me, and I think from a space of love said, "Don't put me through what Susie went through," which is our next door neighbor. And that really stuck with me. And I'm like, I love my mother. And so I did not want to put her through that. So when I seroconverted, I naturally was super disappointed in myself for not being able to ultimately follow through on a promise I made myself, which was to be negative. My mother has this unique talent of getting you in a car and looking at you and going, "Honey, I have a question." And the question's always going to be a doozy because she's got a captive audience and you can't leave. And I would typically say to her, "Mother, do you really want me to answer that question?" She's like, "I asked the question." I'm like, "Okay, here we go." And it's usually about my sex life, which is completely uncomfortable. So I turned the tables on her and I had her in the car and I said, "Mother, I need to talk to you about my health. And the first thing you need to know is that my health is awesome. The next thing you need to know is my health is awesome with the help of 3 pills. 2 I take for my HIV and 1 I take for my hair." And we kind of had a little laugh about that. She stopped and I'm like waiting. What's she gonna say? What's she gonna say? And she thinks about it. She says, "Okay, well, it seems like you're doing really well." And she said the exact same thing that she said when I came out as gay, which I think is what a mother would say. She said, "I just am really concerned that for the last 10 years, you didn't feel like you could share that with anybody. And I'm sad about that."
When I found out, my partner was in the lobby and I asked the doctor just to go grab my boyfriend, and he came in and I told him, and we sat there together together in silence, and the counselor was actually pretty awesome. He just let us sit there. And we left together, and the first people I called were, I reached out to my best friend. I went to her house and lost it. Over a bottle of wine. So I told my best friend. Not very many people, because I was ashamed at first.
After I tested positive, the very first person I told was a close friend of mine who I had had an intimate relationship with in the past. And I didn't tell them because I thought that they were in any danger. I told them because it was the only person who I felt like I could tell at that precise moment. And that person has since then barely spoken to me. The second person I told was my best friend, and I remember I called him and I said, "Hey, you know that news you never want your doctor to tell you? Well, funny story." And he kind of chuckled with me in the way that I brought it up, asked me if I was okay, and we went about our everyday lives. I think after I got done telling him, I went and played dodgeball at the local gym and went to the bar afterwards, had a couple of drinks, and carried on as if it was any other day.
Probably the hardest part is to tell my parents that I contracted HIV, because they were right. They're not, but they were. And
there was a lot of fear, and people were not talking about it, weren't sharing their status. Within the gay community, there were people who were dying that I didn't even know they were positive, because people were getting fired. There was discrimination going on, and there was talk about firing public school teachers if they were HIV positive. So there was, back then, a very different experience than perhaps now in San Francisco. And so I think there was a part of me that really retreated in a lot of ways. Very quiet and pulled back from life.
My father just told me to not really tell anyone about my HIV, that people may not understand. And of course, the first thing I did was run across the street to my godparents' house and tell them I had HIV. Ran over there, told them I had HIV, and I asked them if they still loved me, and they said, "Of course we do. Why would we not love you?"
I knew I needed to tell my family. But I think there's a time for everything, and I didn't want to tell them over the phone. I remember that being like a big thing to me. I wanted to tell them in person. I decided, I quit my job. I gave my month's notice at my apartment, and I bought a car, and I packed up, and I drove home for the holidays, and I had planned on telling my family over the holiday. My sister and I were stuck at home in the blizzard. We got into this fight. I don't even remember what it was about. She ended up locking me outside in the blizzard, and I didn't know too much about HIV at the time. Prior to my diagnosis, I wouldn't even want to talk about it. I didn't want to bring it into my realm of reality. I didn't want to manifest it, if you will. But that was just ignorance looking back. So I'm outside in Minnesota in this blizzard on Christmas Day, locked out, thinking that I'm going to die. I'm going to get sick and I'm going to die. That's what I thought. I thought that I could not get sick. Ended up getting into the house and calling my mother, extremely upset and crying, and She's trying to console me, trying to work out, the sibling fight that was going on, and then I ended up telling her over the phone anyway, which I didn't want to do. And I guess you can never really plan on how to tell somebody that. You can plan, but it's not going to go the way that you plan. I ended up telling her on the phone on Christmas Day. And I remember hearing the phone drop. I went downstairs and I slept for hours, and I woke up and my mother was laying next to me with a sandwich, saying that I need to eat. All of these efforts that I put in to telling them in person, all of this planning I had around, how it would go telling them, and it just did not go the way I planned at all. And it was a mess. It was the biggest mess I've ever been through. I was so sad to tell them. I didn't want them to be right. I didn't want them, to be right about, since I was gay, I'm going to get HIV and I'm going to die. But they were at the time. That's where I was at mentally. I was like, they're right.
The next day I went to school and told everyone, because I figured, well, my godparents loved me, everyone's gonna love me. And that, everyone we're in first grade, so yeah, all the kids were like, okay, let's go play on the swings. They didn't care that I had HIV. But it wasn't until they went home and started asking their parents, what's HIV? What's HIV? And then a lot of parents started coming into school asking, why was there an HIV positive girl playing with their kids on the ground or on the playground? What if something happened? All of this and that. And I'm just so thankful that I had an amazing principal at my elementary school, that she was all about educating all of the teachers about HIV and AIDS and educating the parents that were willing to learn. Of course, I would have kids call me HIV girl. It was pretty normal. And once I got to middle school, definitely a lot more people talking crap about me. There's always rumors that I was some kind of prostitute and drug addict, and that's how I got HIV. And I would always confront people that I would let them know. Got it through my mom. I was born with it.
I feel very comfortable talking about my HIV status. Everybody knows about my HIV status, all my family. And it's interesting enough that when they knew about my HIV status, they were more comfortable with my HIV status than with knowing that I was gay. Very interesting. I still don't get it. But that was a surprise for me, because in a way they were very supportive at the end, when they found out that I was HIV positive. But today they are not very comfortable me being gay, so it's a little interesting.
So disclosing my status is nothing to me, literally. I'll go into bars, I'm not in a relationship, but in bars, even if I found a guy cute or whatever, I'd just be like, hi, my name's Marissa, I do have HIV, but are you interested? I would do that for the shit and giggles, because I'd like to see people's reactions. It just make me laugh. I know it made them uncomfortable, but I was like, fuck it, I gotta have some fun in this shit, I don't like to start relationships and start the feelings for people, and then you tell them that you have HIV and then they just run. So I'm very open right in the front.
I'm always surprised at the number of women that I interact with who say that their family does not know their status. Even though some have volunteered on our project and know what our project is about, family does not know. I began to ask them questions about, of course, why. Think about it. What would prevent you from not telling your family? Many of them think that they would be discarded, they wouldn't be supported. And that's the first thing to start at. You have to ask yourself that. I highly suggest, though, that having someone who supports you would makes all the difference in your maintenance and in what if you are positive. So you have to make a list. This is what I tell them to do. Make a list, and those who are strong friends who have your back, you put a green mark beside them. Those who are so-so friends, you put a yellow mark beside them. And those who are like, they're just not really they're my life, but and you put a red mark beside them. And so then for those who are the green, those are the ones that you want to share that, get that support. The yellows and the reds, those are the ones that you think about, how can I strengthen those relationships? Because ultimately it's a part of you. So if the reds are just folks who you really want to discard, then yeah. But if there's someone you're scared to share but is in your life, then you have to work through, how can I strengthen that relationship? How can I communicate with him or her that I'd like to have his or her support?
And then we talked about what to say to my father, who's 93, doesn't hear that well, is very old school. And she said, what are you going to say to your father? And I'm like, I need some help on that. What do you think we should say? And she said, well, I think what we should say is, it's kind of like managing his shingles. And he always has shingles, but he takes pills to prevent the flare-ups. And I thought that was pretty incredible. Here's an 85-year-old mother. I've just given her a big bit of information, and in 3 minutes, she kind of got it.
I was born in a very conservative family, religiously conservative. So we never had that really openness about talking real deep issues. So it was difficult, of course, for me being gay. I never came really out to my family at that age because I was just discovering, and since I have no one to talk, I never felt comfortable talking about those things. So since I was so young, and then also when I became HIV positive, I found out I was HIV positive when I was 18 years old, but I was able to track when did I seroconverted, and it was when I was 15 years old. So I kept this secret for many years. First of all, because I was hearing all these rejections, and comments towards just being gay. So on top of that, I wasn't out. So in my mind, it was, well, if I'm not comfortable talking about being gay, what is going to happen if they found out if I'm HIV positive?
So obviously, being a gay man in my 20s, I'm still experiencing situations where people are asking questions about my sex life and about my status, and I feel this. It's like an electric shock every time I have to tell them, because I know that I'm going to tell them the answer that they're not wanting to hear. So when I tell someone that I am HIV positive, I get a kick out of it almost, because I know that I'm about to have the opportunity to educate someone about where the disease is at and who I am and if I'm healthy and so on and so forth. And I know that may not be how everybody sees it, but I've chosen to try and stay as positive as I can about being positive. And for me, I try to see it as an opportunity to educate somebody about me and what I'm going through.
There weren't any medications. The first one that came out was AZT, and of course I got on it, and it didn't last very long. It didn't help for very long. It was never good news when I went to the doctor. There were not always new treatments that were available. So at the time, there was the San Francisco Buyers Club, and we'd be going to the Buyers Club to either get medications for trials that were going on, and people who were in the studies were actually selling their medications or giving them because they didn't want to take them or they were making them sick. I actually joined a study, was one of the last people enrolled in the study, and I fortunately got the full product. And it was clear that it was keeping me alive. I never had any opportunistic infections, but I had one T cell for many years, and I should have had many opportunistic infections. I shouldn't have been alive, but this treatment was keeping me alive. We kept at that for several years until protease inhibitors came out. And once the protease inhibitors came out, it changed everything.
When I became positive, I haven't and will not assume or place blame on my partner who gave me the virus, because I wasn't doing anything that I didn't want to do, and I wasn't doing it with anybody I didn't want to do it with. And I think having that discussion and that disclosure enables both of us to participate in the actions that we're taking, and for both of us to take ownership over that.
After going through that depression and almost committing suicide, it really gave me a whole nother outlook on life, you know? I was so young to already be so miserable in life. So young. And I just looked at like the rest of my life, like it cannot be this bad. It just can't, you know? And this thing just clicked in my head, like I'm not ever going to allow it to be this bad again, you know? Like this is a choice of mine, and there is no choice in my mind to live a miserable, depressed life. Nope. No, thank you.
I wasn't sure how it was going to affect my body, mentally, physically. So I decided to start medication elsewhere, not around people that I really knew. I kind of hermited myself for a little bit. I moved to Atlanta. I was unsure if I should take the homeopathic route or, get on these medications that there are tons of pros and cons to. So it was a really big decision for a young 20-year-old to make. Found out about these clinical studies that have always piqued my interest, because I figured if I had this thing inside me that's trying to kill me anyway, I might as well do everything I can to stop it, if not within me, down the line.
I was able to make good friends, connections with people from San Francisco, from the Bay Area. And there were people who helped me coming to the United States. They convinced me to come and find out where I was in terms of my disease. And finally, actually ending up coming and asking for asylum due to being gay and being HIV positive. The transition wasn't easy, and also was very scary, because when I came here, actually, I got really very sick. So I ended up being in the hospital, in San Francisco General Hospital, for almost 5 months. So I was really very sick. I ended up having an opportunistic infection, and I was away from home, away from family, from everything. I had no one really here. So I spent all that time, all those 5 months, really thinking about these things, what was important in life. And I remember very clearly that I made a choice that if I would survive, I will make something about it.
I am currently not on medication because I'm in a clinical study. They genetically alter your T cells to where the virus isn't able to get into the T cell. They cut off the doorway. And to further that, they had me grow my own stem cells, and then they extracted them along with the genetically altered T cells in hopes that the stem cells will turn into those genetically altered T cells, and they'll keep recreating each other. I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell.
Years ago, I started getting real sick to my stomach after being on medication for so long. And I decided to get involved in my community because I was not going to live with HIV, be on disability, and go, wow, woe is me. I was going to do something.
So here's the thing. Perceptions are everything. When a man discloses that he was having sex probably with multiple women, he's kind of patted on the back. He's like, well, you're a man. You do that. If a woman ever disclosed that she had sex, in which we know that a lot of women contract HIV in monogamous relationships, but the perception is that she was out there having sex with multiple people, and that does happen. But the perception is that, oh, she was a whore. She was giving her stuff away. So a lot of shame comes with that. So there's a different perception in terms of when men disclose that they're HIV positive, they're being men, versus a woman who discloses HIV positive. Oh, you're out there being dirty, trashy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so it goes on. And so when I'm having these discussions with our women, they share that. It's a lot of shame, a lot of self-loathing, a lot of forgiveness that has to go on, even though many have shared that they contracted from their partner who they thought they were involved. Some disclosed that they were out there doing drugs, needle sharing. But still, it still has that implication that somehow you were dirty in contracting HIV.
We live in an age where HIV has gone from a crisis to a manageable disease, which is a lie. And it's a lie because it's only a manageable disease if you have access to care.
Most women that are HIV positive have been through trauma. There's a series that happens in life that bring you to HIV. It's way more than HIV. It's mental health, it's addiction, it's drugs, it's sexual trauma. It is so much more. Why did we get HIV? Why did a lot of people end up getting HIV? A lot of it is has to do with your self-worth and your self-love, and where do you end up losing that a lot of times, being abused, whether it's verbally, sexually, you name it, and they treat us just like the men. Well, we can't be treated us just like the men because we need different things. Women need gynecological. HIV does affect a lot of that stuff. There's childcare. There's worries about childcare. A lot of women that are HIV positive are on disability and don't have the means for even transportation to get to their doctor visits or get to their support meetings that they need, so they end up being isolated.
So the work I do in the HIV community is very exciting for me. I work with a small grassroots organization called Impulse Group. I'm now an officer of the organization. I'm our director of community outreach, and my job is to figure out how to talk to people about HIV in a way that's not scary, gets people excited, and has a message that is important and helps prevention, but at the same time makes people feel comfortable having the conversations that in the past have maybe been a little uncomfortable for some people.
So what I would tell women, the message I would have for women is in order to move forward, to grow, to be, I guess, the best you can be, you have to forgive yourself and to say, listen, this is where I am now, and this is how I need to proceed to keep myself healthy. Many women who I run across have shared that when they found out they were positive, they just wanted to die. So I knew that when I started the project that, well, I did know, but as I soon found out, that it was going to be hard to get those women into care because they didn't want to live. So why would they want to be in care if they didn't want to live? So the message would be, you have to forgive yourself and try to live the best life you can live, because it's not a death sentence. It's just a situation. It's a condition that can be managed, and you can live with it.
It's interesting playing an HIV positive character named Billy in the 2 PSAs that I did. Was, again, I honestly did it for my best friend, because he is a Puerto Rican a man living in New York, and he is, it's sort of, I wanted to sort of, shed some light on his story, and, he's like a brother from another mother type of thing, and, but playing that character, it just really, honestly, it opened me up to the vulnerabilities of being an HIV positive person. Whatever role I have, I take it to heart, but this particular role is very dear to me, because I think that showing the world that an HIV positive gay man can be in a loving relationship with someone who is HIV negative and still be in a serodiscordant relationship and be happy and get to experience all the joys that people who don't have the disease have, and live without shame, without guilt, is so important.
When I started working with Impulse, the project that I was most proud to be a part of was a project to create short films that told the stories that were happening all around us. I felt like people knew what was going on, but they weren't willing to talk about it. So maybe if we got everybody talking about, say, a viral video, that if that viral video contained these things that were going on, people would feel a little bit more comfortable having the conversation about things like serodiscordant relationships and testing HIV positive and knowing your status. In the film Knowing, we see a character who is named Billy, who you can definitely see that he wishes to be treated and loved the same way he was before he became HIV positive, but definitely feels this discomfort in disclosing his status and who he is as a result of his HIV diagnosis. And I see someone in my life who I love very much who would prefer to remain anonymous, but who my heart breaks whenever I see the parallels between them, because I've watched them suffer so much as they come to grips with their HIV status.
I got involved with the AIDS rides because of one of my best friends who was diagnosed HIV positive the summer before. And he had gotten a lot of services through the LA Gay and Lesbian Center, who's one of the beneficiaries for the AIDS ride. And I saw what they could do and how they really help people's lives. And to be honest, I've never really been much for charity. There are a whole lot of causes, and I don't have enough money to add to each of them, but this one was close enough to home that it got me to the point where I could consider it. But what really surprised me during the whole fundraising process was that every other person I talked to had a personal story and opened up to me in a way that I didn't think would ever happen. For example, one of my senior vice presidents at the bank responded very genuinely to my request. She went over and closed the door to her office, and for a half hour she told me the story of her brother and how he had died in the 80s from HIV/AIDS. And then a woman that I had had maybe 2 or 3 one-sentence conversations with up until that point pulled out her checkbook and donated $250, and that changed my mind about fundraising.
So this is my second time that I'm doing the AIDS LifeCycle, which is a 545-mile charity bike ride with the purpose of supporting 2 greater organizations that have supported me. I have set a very ambitious goal of raising $54,000 to support these organizations. That's a low dollar amount when you consider all that they have done for me and what they have given back to me. It's $1,000 for every year of my life. It's $100 for every mile that I'll ride.
2 years ago, I was told by my doctor that my blood sugar level was not under control and I needed to take this medication. And of course, I was in denial. I was like, no, she is mistaken. I don't know who she thinks she's talking to. But after the realization hit me was, well, actually, it was 4 years ago. As I kept going back to her, my blood sugar level was not in control. And she kind of did some of this, like, put the realization in your face. Like, if you don't control the blood sugar level, your kidneys start failing, your eyesight goes out, you know. And also, I should know this because my mother, you know, she died from kidney failure, same thing. But then I had a brother who'd passed, and I think that was awakening, a bit of an awakening for me. And he had a number of things and that. So although I always explain to them, I don't know what it means to be HIV positive, but I can certainly understand being told that you have this thing that you have to live with and you have to get it under control so that you can live a healthier life.
I come from a medical family. Everyone in my family are doctors, so it's very scientific and pragmatic. And I have a little bit of that, but I also believe in faith and in healing, and we need to heal ourselves before we go further. So I hope that people in this amazing age of technology and amazing wonders, that people will just try to be a little bit more compassionate towards each other.
Talking about my status freely has empowered me to feel better about who I am and what I'm going through. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case for everyone. It's not. In fact, I know that many people feel discriminated against and judged, and the fact is that in our society that's still happening. I've just chosen to move forward with brute force to try and stop that from happening to me.
I didn't come out as gay until I was 30. And one of the things that I would thought to myself was, if it took me 30 years to get comfortable with my sexual orientation, how can I expect it to be any less for other people to get comfortable around it? When I found out that I was HIV positive, it only took me 10 years. So think of that. I'm a lot more quicker, more able to be comfortable with that than I was being gay. And that process allowed a couple of things that I actually think were really important. One, we know so much more about HIV now than we did 10 years ago. Two, I was able to go through a process and people were able to see my health in the course of 10 years. And three, it was able, and I think this is important, for me to just get comfortable in my own skin and to be confident in myself about the completeness of myself, which includes HIV, but isn't defined by HIV.
My role is to be a friend, to be supportive, and I don't think someone's HIV status is any more of a defining trait in them than where they're from or what they do. I think my friends are my friends not because of their HIV status, and they will continue to be so even if that changes.
I take my medication daily, like my vitamins, and it's just part of my daily routine, and then the rest of my life moves on. So it's not like weighing on me every day.
I say if you're managing the stigma or you want to fight stigma, be who you are. Don't care about what anyone says about you, because as long as you're confident in who you are and you know who you are, it doesn't matter what anyone else says at all.
I was afraid that no one would want to be with me after I contracted HIV. I was in an unhealthy relationship at the time, and I stayed in it for a year and a half more because of the fear around being alone, being isolated, and I didn't know any better, but it was surprising, actually. After I did start speaking out about it, the responses were very understanding. I haven't been turned down too many times. It's changed my life, but I feel for the better. I love who I am today versus then.
My life was took a complete change, 180 degrees change since I started to be more comfortable and open. It just gave me the tools to really start healing, and to make real connections. And it was a way of processing that my HIV doesn't really define who I am, but it's important. It has shaped who I am.